Okay, well, I hope everybody's staying warm. The crazy weather. Um, I don't think it's supposed to get warmer for a while. I think it's supposed to get colder. And so bundle up. Let your car warm up extra long time. Uh, I was raised on a farm, so I always let even regardless what the car is, how old it was, new it is, I always let it warm up at least in this kind of weather, at least 10 minutes, 10 to 12, 10, 15 minutes, let it warm up. It's always good. Um, anyway, week two, camera history is what we're covering tonight. Um, I had a few people over the weekend do a live chat, so if you want to use that, definitely it's there for you to utilize. When you click on that, if I'm available, I think it's 90 seconds it gives me to answer you. If I don't answer you in 90 seconds, it says I'm not available. You can email me though immediately. I will get to you, even if it's on a weekend. A lot of times I will reply to you on the weekend. I do check my email. I try to take a little break over the weekend, but I do check my email periodically over the weekend. My wife's going to be going out of town to be with her father. He's not doing well, and so I'll probably be checking my email more because she won't be home um, here in the next few days. And so, but normally I do check it on the weekends quite often and through the week. So, okay, we're going to be going over some notes here in a second. I believe it's in the third tab. What you're hearing and seeing will be here in this TBP area for podcast. Week two notes should load in a Google app for intro to digital photography. And I'm going to go to full screen mode here. And then I'll go down this way. So, introduction to digital photography. Basically, tonight we're going to go over some introduction stuff on what digital photography is about, some history on cameras, camera types, pixels, and then we will go over your in-class and also your take-home exercise as well. So first thing is, the technology. You've heard of maybe some of these terms already over the years. DSLR, megapixels, image stabilization, dust reduction, live view, sensors, facial recognition. What does all mean? Why does it matter to you? Hopefully I'll explain a little bit of that tonight, or why it should matter. Three types of main classifications when it comes to cameras. You've got your point and shoot, which most of you have, or you've had in the past tense. Prosumer is kind of mid-range, and then you have the higher end DSLR camera, digital SLR camera. And really today, most of your point and shoots are more than enough for most hobbyist photographers. Those are going into more professional type of photography, would definitely want to go in the mid DSLR type of range. But the skills you learned this semester, like I mentioned last week, can apply to all cameras, regardless of what type it is that you have currently. The one thing I don't want you to do, and I'll mention it this week, I'll mention it probably next week again, is I don't want you to go out and buy a brand new camera for this class. Use whatever camera you currently have. I have had students even borrow a camera from their parents, from friends, to take the course until you decide what kind of camera it is you really want. And you can have some time to do that versus just going out and buy one right now. So, point and shoot's the first category, commonly referred to as consumer digital cameras. They represent about 90% of all digital cameras on the market. Typically small, compact, and lightweight. They do target a broad audience. Typically very intuitive and user-friendly. And the image quality has improved drastically over the years. And the evolution of point and shoots from where they used to be to where they are now is like light years. It's just crazy. Even the camera quality of your digital phones over the last few years have really increased a lot as well. Prosumer, not technically its own specification, kind of mid-range, commonly used to describe advanced models of point and shoot, similar in shape and appearance, typically have extended zoom of some type, typically combined user-friendly point and shoot features with a few more advanced manual, I guess keyword there is manual features that you do not have sometimes in a point and shoot. A lot of times point and shoot will have a lot of automatic features, and in prosumer mid-range you have more, getting more into the manual type of features where you can override things. SLR stands for single lens reflex. It has a larger lens resulting in a greater image quality. And we'll talk this semester about what the differences in lenses and what the lens actually does on all these cameras. But the lens is a bit larger on the DSLR. Tend to favor manual control. They generally lack automatic settings found on point and shoot. That's really not the case anymore. A lot of your DSLRs have the same settings as your point and shoot, plus you have the manual options, because people like those automatic features so much that over the years, in the last year, 2 years, your DSLRs pretty much, you're not losing anything coming from a point and shoot to a DSLR. You're just gaining manual control, basically. So what is the real difference between a digital SLR and a point and shoot? I'm glad you asked. Really, the short answer is image quality. Image quality. How can a 6 megapixel DSLR take a better picture than a 10 megapixel point and shoot? So you could have a larger megapixel on a point and shoot than a DSLR, and the DSLR will take a better picture. Size matters when it comes to pixels, and specifically the pixels we're talking about are what's created by the camera digitally with the sensor, camera sensor. So the quality of the sensor is what makes the quality of the image. Not really how many megapixels, even though megapixels do matter. What really matters the most, though, is the quality of that image sensor inside of the camera, the brains of the camera, basically. So essentially, each digital image is made from millions of tiny squares known as pixels. Essentially, an image is recorded by tiny micro lenses called pixels, which make up the camera sensor. So we have a picture of a deer, and it's blowing up the ear, and you can really see the pixelated part of the ear, block by block. So the quality of the image sensor on the camera would make a better image. So when you're paying for a higher camera, money-wise, you're not paying for megapixels as much as you're paying for the actual chip inside of it, which is called the sensor. So all pixels are not created equal. A digital sensor is essentially made up of millions of tiny little micro pixels, micro lenses. Pixels are analog devices which record light and color. Larger sensors contain larger pixels, which are much better at collecting data. And so you have a wider color spectrum, and you have a wider spectrum to create those pixels. It's kind of like the difference between a phone, today's phone, and a tablet. Okay? Prime example of saying you've got a whiteboard on both, a whiteboard type of app on the phone and a whiteboard type of app on tablet. It's much easier to draw something more particular and be exact on a tablet than it would be on a phone, because you don't have as much real estate to work with. So the larger, in that case, the larger the actual quality of that sensor, the better the pictures are going to be, and the more pixels you have available too as well. So here's look at some examples of digital comparison to 35 millimeter. I shot in 35 millimeter for years, and even today's high-end DSLRs are reaching 35 millimeters, but they're not quite there as yet when it comes to the sensor itself. You'll notice one of the Canon 10D, 300D is probably one of the closest ones. But then if you go down further, these are just referring to chip size within most of your point and shoot mid-range cameras. And then you'll notice the red refers to what the chip size would be in a kind of a fictitious way as far as the quality of the image that's coming out. 35 millimeters never had a sensor, but if they did, that's the size it would be today.
Would it matter the film speed?
Film speed, no. It wouldn't, nope.
Because the faster the film, the more grain it gets.
Yeah, I mean, that would just be the quality of the speed of the film, but as far as overall quality, still 35 millimeter today even supersedes all digital cameras. So digital cameras, well, and the reason people don't notice as much today is most, I would say most, 80% of images are digitized for web interface or TV or movie or whatever. When we're pulling away, even in the newspaper world, the magazine world, away from hard copy into digital, and so you don't really see a difference. You don't see, people that were staunch 35 millimeter folks, like that work in the newspaper still, or work in advertising, or work in whatever, have put their 35 millimeter side because a digital camera could do just, in the digital world, it can be just as good quality as a 35 millimeter in a digital world anyway. Now, as far as spectrum of full frame, the sensor matters as well. So the sensor, or the lens, I guess up to this point, most people think it's the size of the lens and the circumference of how large of a scope that lens can see, meaning a wide angle lens or a micro lens, a macro lens. But really what takes a full spectrum of colors and light is a sensor. So you could have the best camera, you could actually have the best money could buy telephoto lens and have a crappy sensor, and the quality of the image would be crappy, regardless of the thousands of dollars you spent on a lens. I guess analogy would be kind of like putting a VW engine in like a Lamborghini or something. I don't know, something like that. It looks like a Lamborghini. You sit inside, feels like one, but when you go put it in, it just kind of zips along. But for what most of you guys are going to use cameras for, digital is just fine. But this is kind of a good history of where we're at. Digital camera features and technologies, some terminologies here. Megapixels determine the size or dimension of the image recorded by the camera. So megapixels, again, just remember, determines the size, not quality. Quality comes from the sensor. And that's the first lesson, I guess, to learn in week 2 that you probably didn't know is sensor is what depicts quality, not megapixel. Megapixel just depicts size. That's it. More megapixels do not always mean a better picture. Digital image dimensions do not equal print dimensions. The reason I said that is with the digital age, really the highest dots per inch, which you'll learn what that's about this semester, on the web interface that they want is 72 dots per inch. It's like really small. You don't need a high quality image to post on the web to look high quality. Just a 72 DPI image and it's good to go. And some of these images that are printed out on magazines are millions and millions and millions of DPI per inch, some of them, depending on the telephoto lens they're using, depending on the macro lens they're using. For example, a full quality image from an 8 megapixel camera will produce a digital image producing approximately 9 by 11 or 9 by 14 inches, but printing standards say that you should not print photo quality any larger than 8 by 10. And so that's just a printing standard. When you go to a print shop, I was in graphic design for a number of years. We had a print shop we had to send our stuff to every week. And that was back in the days where they had different, each roll on the printer had a different color that it would roll out for that print. So you had your magenta, you had your cyan, you had your black that would roll on to that magazine is what I worked on. And so you would take your little layouts of the magazine on a big piece of paper, and all the proofs for text and images were all on this big sheet of paper. And it was film basically, and they took that film, put it actually on the rollers, and it would one roller per film to roll out the magazine. And so it was a pretty good long process, but today it's a lot easier. If you ever get a chance to take a tour of like the Register Star, since they put in their new printer from Germany, they came in, had to level it out. And by the way, they do give tours for anybody that want to go. They give tours, so just walk in and give you a tour. Anyway, when they brought in the new printer, or the print press, it's like the size of a football field, that thing is, perfectly level. The same folks that designed the Swiss watch basically designed these printers and how they, because if they're off just a kilter, just a centimeter, it can cause a lot of problems. But it's all digitized, and everything's, they still have ink that flow through it, but everything's all digitized now from what it used to be. But they still have the old printers in there, and they kind of show you that too, so it's trying to come to some history. So this graph just gives basically dimensions of pixels versus print, and it's hard to see on there, but basically you have here how many megapixels needed to print out whatever size. So here's like a 4x5, 2 megapixel, all the way up to a 27 by 18, 44 megapixel, which if I'm not mistaken, I think it's a Samsung phone or something. It's a 41 megapixel, is that right? Is it 41 megapixel? What is it? The Luminous? Is it 40 plus megapixels, right? Yeah, it's crazy. And I've heard the chip quality in that's pretty good too, from what I've heard. Yeah, I mean, you have no lens, but now movement composition. This is something that, with the advent of digital cameras, moving from 35 millimeter to digital has been a great thing. Movement compensation refers to the camera's ability to correct small movements by the user while taking a picture, or vice versa by the subject while taking a picture and correcting it without the blur. Very useful in low lighting and telephoto type of shots. A telephoto meaning something far away, to where just a slight move of your hand can really mess something up. And so the stabilization helps a lot. And you'll find out in a second, all these companies have different patented words or terms for stabilization. So let's look at some. Nikon is VR, vibration reduction. Canon, IS, image stabilization. Pentax, SR, shake reduction. And Sony, SSS, super steady shot. So they're all patented terms that they use and only they can use. Same technology though, same concept, just different words. Dust reduction, due to dust everywhere, even though you don't see it. In fact, I heard something the other day that was kind of interesting. Not much into science, but it interests me a little bit. I was big into, when I was a kid, my grandfather was a physicist, and so he would, at 5 years old, try to teach me about magnetic forces in the world. What do you imagine a 5-year-old being like, okay, it's magnets, I can see it's cool, but I don't know what you're talking about. Because you have the two magnets, right, and you put them on the floor, and you push one towards the other, and the other one pushes away. You ever done that before? And magnets still interest me to this day. There's that invisible force that you don't see. It's everywhere. Electricity. But the other visible force that's everywhere is dust. And one of the questions over the weekend, a gentleman who was a principal for years told me he would quiz his biology teachers. He would say, they got hired, he would say, why is the sky blue when you look up? What makes it blue? And the answer was, anywhere, if they said anything like this, the way the sun reflects off the dust particles in the atmosphere is what causes the blue. And that's the answer, which I didn't know that. One guy said, because of the reflection of the ocean. That's the wrong answer. uh, but the dust particles is what causes. But there's dust around, micro dust we don't see, just like electricity we don't see, just like the wind we don't see. And so we feel wind, electricity we feel, and dust also, when it's accumulated enough, we see, especially when it comes to cameras. Now, the one camera, though, really affects the only category is a DSLR. And the reason for that is because the lenses can be detached from the actual camera body. Does that make sense? In fact, when you buy a lot of DSLRs, they don't even come with a real lens. It's, just a cheapo lens maybe put on there. Because really what they make money a lot in DSLRs is the lenses. That's where they make all the money, accessories. But anyway, taking those lenses on and off, causes dust. And once dust is in your sensor, it can be difficult to remove. Dust reduction is essentially a mechanism which shakes the camera sensor to free any clean dust particles, and special anti-static coating also on the filters helps as well. And so it's kind of a combination of shake and also the coating that they put. And it's mainly towards DSLR only, but point and shoots and mid-range also have that same coating on the brains of the camera, the sensor of the camera. Live view, all models have this from point and shoot to mid-range to DSLR. This refers to the ability to use the LCD screen on the camera the same way you would use a viewfinder. Shots can be composed up here and you can see something. That's a good way to do it, like you're in a concert. We've all done it maybe. Hold the camera up high. At a birthday party, whatever. Hold the camera up high. It's really great to use that. Originally only found in point and shoot, but they're everywhere now. The one that doesn't mention on the slide is it does suck battery quickly. So I use it sparingly. If the camera's down here in view, like right here, I don't ever use the LCD viewer. I use the viewfinder only, because that does save battery life. When you take the picture, though, most of your cameras will allow you to have the LCD come on for a few seconds to view the photo, and then it goes away. Okay, I recommend that. But if you are in situations where you have to hold it up, that's what it's there for. And use it. Batteries, let's talk about that for a second. I suggest carrying with you at least one extra battery. That means you do have to buy that extra battery at least, usually, for most of your cameras. Whether it be, spend about $15 on a lithium charger if your camera takes, say, triple A's or double A's or whatever. Because over time, it's going to be, even though it's $15 initially, that'll pay for itself in a year's time easy, right? Because if you buy the charger and 4 batteries, and say your camera takes 2 batteries, you can always keep a battery charge in the backup. And that way you have the charge in your camera and a backup in your bag. Does that make sense? And so I definitely recommend buying an extra battery. I have had batteries die on me, like internal lithium batteries, the nice ones on the DSLRs, those will die, just like anything, like a car battery. Especially the more you use it, the more degradation is going to happen and it's going to destroy. Just like your laptops or your phones or anything, the more it's on and that thing's heated up, if you've ever been on your phone a long time or laptop or tablet and the thing gets hot, the more and more that stays hot, the more and more it degrades the system and can fry, say, a battery. Okay, that's usually the first thing to go. And that's the way they're designed too, by the way. So no other components are hurt. Facial recognition, everywhere you see this now, right? Not just on digital cameras, but also on your phones you have facial recognition, on your computers you have facial recognition. People can now authenticate with facial recognition on their computer, on their desktop, on their laptop, on their tablet, right? Just look into the device and it logs you in. I think that's I'm a programmer too, but one of the things I've always gravitated towards is biometrics and facial recognition, fingerprint recognition, voice recognition. Does anybody have parents or you yourself or siblings or somebody in your family works in healthcare? Okay, well, my wife worked in healthcare until she retired. I worked in healthcare going through school as a phlebotomist. I drew blood. I was a vampire. And then, so a lot of my family's been in healthcare. My mother-in-law's in healthcare. Two cousins that's nurses. But anyway, with healthcare, one of the things that, especially now, it used to be back when I was in healthcare too, but even now, is patient confidentiality and HIPAA rights with your medical records. And because of the advent of, when you guys go to doctor's office now, the computer's in the room right there with you, right? They're putting all your stats in there, your blood pressure, whatever. I have to go every 3 months to get checked up. Most of you have to go at least once a year. Everything's computerized, and they log in with a password. One of the ways I think it should happen, and I've talked to a lot of doctors about it, see what you guys think, is walking into a room, instead of having to log into that device, use facial recognition, or a combination of facial and voice recognition, both, to log into a computer. Because there's been trials on like proximity cards. When you walk up to the computer, it logs you in, you walk away, it logs you out. But I can steal a proximity card. I can steal your proximity card and log in as you, but it's hard to steal your face and your voice. I'm not saying it can't be done. Mission Impossible, Tom Cruise, yeah, they did it there. But normally, not going to be done too much. But the reason I mention that is cameras have facial recognition, right? Most of you are aware of that. And Facebook has recognition to where as you upload pictures, it'll recognize faces and categorize them by your face. On cameras, what it does, the focus is automatically adjusted. So detail on faces is high. They call tonal range. The tonal range is what the chip in the camera recognizes. So if I was to take a camera and point it towards you right now tonight and just pan the room, the camera would automatically recognize tonal ranges first and foremost over every item, every object in this room. It would give precedence. That's how they programmed, the folks who designed those chips, programmed the chips to recognize facial recognition first and foremost. Because that's 99.9% of what people take pictures of today automatically is faces, right? Thirdly, on facial recognition, color and contrast are automatically adjusted also to create pleasing skin tones. So it recognizes the face, adjusts accordingly to your skin tones, and you get a great picture. So getting a good shot. A lot of you come to this class wanting to take better shots of the people that you take pictures of, nature, whatever. There's literally hundreds of factors that go into a good photo, and I'm not going to be able to teach you all those factors this semester. I'll teach you what's worked for me and what I've seen it's worked for others that I've worked with in photography. It's still, though, a relative term as far as making a good photo. And good to one person may not be good to someone else. An example was the assignment you did last week of all the photos you looked at and submitted one or more and made a comment on why that picture jumped out to you. Every single person had a different reason why that photo was important to them, why it jumped out to them. Some it was the color, how it made you emotional, it made you excited, it made you sad, it made you thoughtful, it made you think of others, made you compassionate towards others. A whole bunch of different feelings go through when you see them and why you choose something. For our purpose, we're going to refer to good in the sense of correct exposure, which everybody can relate to. Correct exposure. So, exposure. Correct or good exposure occurs when you maintain as much detail as possible in both the very bright parts or highlights as well as the very dark parts or shadows. So any of you been working in Photoshop before, you have highlights and shadows when it comes to any image, right? You have your wide spectrum of highlights and shadows on a spectrum of an image. So getting a good balance between highlights and shadows is what makes a good image. How much of a range in which you capture your detail from light to dark is referred to as dynamic range. As you're about to see, there are many correct or good exposures, but there's three factors that influence exposure on your image. The first is shutter speed, second, aperture, and third is ISO. And we will be focusing on these three a lot this semester: shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. So let's look at some of these here. First is shutter speed. Refers to how long the shutter is open on your camera, exposing the image sensor to the light, whatever that light is, whether it's terrible light like in here, or good light in the morning, good light at dusk. And by the way, the best light outside, regardless of the weather, is always going to be first in the morning and then dusk, right when the sun's coming up and right when the sun's going down. Is the best lighting for your sensor to get a really rich skin tones and landscape, anything you can think of. It's great lighting. Now, how long the camera sees the picture is also basically how you might hear it termed as. How long it sees a picture. The shutter's open, it sees it, it shuts. It's measured in seconds, from 30 down to 1/8,000th of a second. So fast shutter speed, like 600 seconds and up, are used to stop motion and freeze the subject. And so while people jump in the air, you can literally, like these pictures on the right and left, you can basically, looks like they've stopped in motion, kind of like a matrix effect with that photo. And we've all seen these photos, from wedding invitations to graduations, where people jump up in the air and you snap the photo and it freezes them right midair. And that's how it's done with fast exposure or fast shutter speed. Slow shutter speed does the opposite. So 1/60th or slower is going to portray it as movement. So we have here on the left side some rocks with water flowing over it. With a slow shutter speed, it's going to show movement in that picture. Runners running down the road in a race. You'll notice the legs, for sure, are the most blurred. We have other parts, the arms and the body is going to be blurred as well. So it shows motion when you do a slower shutter speed. And then if you take that really, really slow, like 5 seconds or slower, like really opening that up for 5 seconds, and letting it just sit there, look what it does. It takes the lights of a highway and blurs them all together. I saw a picture a couple semesters ago. A photographer came and showed us a picture of a long exposure in southern Illinois in the wind farms. It was a 12-hour exposure of a wind farm, and they all look like those round popsicles with the twirls in them. It was in the middle of the day. Like he started like 6 in the morning, went to 6 to 9, I think, and that's what it looked like. Like 10 of them all in a row. Looked like just a big lollipop, basically. Looked pretty cool. But when you want to do a dramatic effect, looks great. We've all seen these type of things in music videos and movies when they're showing a dramatic scene or a race scene. You'll see that a lot of times. And so sometimes you play with shutter speed to get that. Beware though, as your shutter speed decreases, your chances of getting a blurry image increases because of the camera's steadiness or unsteadiness, depending on your hands. That's where a tripod comes in. So the longer the shutter speeds, the better opportunity to use a tripod, or what I do a lot of times is just lean against a tree or lean against something to steady my camera while I'm holding it. Doesn't have to be a tripod all the time. In fact, sometimes you can't. You don't have a tripod. And so you want something that will lean against. Could be getting on the ground, getting on level on the ground works as well. To get a different angle that we'll learn about this semester. So we've talked about shutter. Now let's go into aperture. Aperture is defined as a hole in the opening through which light is admitted. Inside the camera lens is a system of blades like this. This is definitely dramatized, but you can definitely see it, which open and close to increase or decrease the opening through which the light passes through. So the aperture, or the f-stop, it's also called, is determined upon the hole, the size of that hole, while the shutter's open, and however, whether it's fast or whether it's slow. Okay, so aperture is the second of when allowing the light to come in, or allowing that light to come into that picture, to come into the sensor. It's also referred as the f-stop. Aperture is usually represented by increments of like f-stop 1.8, f-stop 5.6. The smaller number means a wider opening, and a larger number means a smaller opening. So a large aperture of 2.0, a small aperture is 22. The wider the lens is open, larger aperture, the more light gets in, you can use a faster shutter speed. A lot of your cameras will have aperture mode, and when it's in aperture mode, it controls shutter speed. Shutter mode, when it's in shutter mode, it controls aperture speed, or aperture opening. Okay? And so a lot of your cameras will have both of those modes. So in aperture, starting from the left, f-stop 2, 4, 8, and 16. And you'll notice as the numbers increase, the hole decreases. Depth of field. Aperture also determines and controls the depth of field, or I like to call it the 3D effect of your image. How many dimensions does your image have? Okay, when you're looking at images, when you're looking at your subject, I want you to think of dimensions, because initially when we start taking photos, we want to just think of the subject and that's it. But when you start thinking of dimensions, you start thinking of what's behind the subject, what's in front of the subject. And the more you think of that, the more dimensions your photo will get at the end. Okay? So if you put something in front of the subject, just a little bit in front of the subject to kind of complement the subject, and so whatever's behind it also complements it but doesn't detach from it, it's going to make that image more dynamic and more dimensional, three-dimensional. And depth of field, when aperture definitely controls that. So it determines, or it refers to how much of your image is in focus. Like an example would be somebody standing against a locker in high school or even in a workplace, and the camera focuses on their face, but behind them the locker's kind of blurred out. Okay?
The one picture that we all looked at the assignment of the little girl in the grass.
Yes.
That's a perfect example.
It is.
Everything in front of her and behind her is out of focus.
Yes.
It's just sharp as a tack.
Perfect focus on her, you're right. And so, yeah, that's definitely depth of field to where and you can do that post-production in Photoshop, but you can also do that with the right aperture speed, right aperture setting. You can actually cause that to happen. A wide aperture, a small number, will give a shallow or depth of field, more of a flatter, whereas a larger aperture or a smaller opening will give a more shallower depth of field. So here we have an example. Shallow depth of field, f2.8, 2.8. You'll notice here you have some blurring going on, as you mentioned with the little girl. Same thing here with the balls of twine in this image. Focusing on that first one, the latter two are kind of blurred out to accentuate that first object. The second one has a wide depth of field. It's all pretty linear, non-dimensional, and it's pretty flat, pretty boring. But there is times you want to do the one on the right. If you're doing product placement and you're working for a marketing firm and you want to get all the images in that picture, you don't want any of those images to be blurred. So you would want the wide depth of field for those cases. But if you're promoting a laptop, desktop, an object, a ring, a watch, usually in those type of items, you are focusing on the object, and then anything behind it or in front of it's kind of blurred out. And you're, in that case, have a shallower depth of field, which would mean a smaller f-stop. ISO, so in shutter speed, aperture, ISO, the three legs of a good photo. Aperture, ISO, and shutter speed. So ISO refers to the light sensitivity of the sensor. High ISO value means the sensor will be more sensitive to light, meaning it will take less light to take the right exposure, to get the right exposure. is similar to film speeds in 35 millimeter. Now this has to do with film speeds when it comes to ISO on the light. And so most of your point and shoots and mid-range and even your DSLRs will have a high ISO setting, okay? But you also have the ability in most all your cameras to manually control your ISO. So say from 80 all the way up to sometimes 1600 in that range. And we'll find out what happens in that range here in a second. So typically, I said 80, 100 to 1600. Some of your cameras will go down as small as 80. Newer digital cameras can go up to 64,000 in a higher range. A high ISO causes the sensor to produce much more heat, which produces also noise in the image, or a granular type of effect. It's not pixelated, it's grain. It's kind of like it has a pattern on the image, like a grainy pattern, kind of is what best way to explain it. So like in this room here, we have terrible lighting. So you would definitely bump up the ISO in this room to offset the terrible lighting. It basically fakes out the sensor to tell the sensor what the light should be. Does that make sense? We'll learn this semester where you can also fake the sensor out to tell the sensor what true white is. Because the sensor doesn't know what true white is. You have to tell it what true white is. The same with the sensor. When it sees this room, it sees it differently than you and I. If I was to go and take everybody in this room and walk out into another room that was pitch dark, and we shut the door, within seconds, our eyes would adjust, probably less than a second, and we would be able to see in front of our, see each other probably. If it just had a door under the light or a light under the door or something like that. Because our eyes adjust automatically, right? When we walk into a room. Same, but your cameras don't. Cameras don't adjust. So same with this room here. Your eyes fill in stuff too sometimes, right? You don't even know it. I don't even know it. But when we see things three-dimensionally. We see things like we don't need a 3D movie. We are in a 3D movie. Right? We are living in a 3D movie. We see everything three-dimensionally. Your camera doesn't. Your camera sees everything one-dimensionally. And it's up to you as a photographer to give that third dimension in a photo. Does that make sense? And you have to stage it basically like a movie producer does, like a Steven Spielberg does, these guys at Ron Howard, they have the eye to see things differently than the normal person when it comes to film. Same thing with cameras though, with taking your pictures. You'll train your eye to like something and be able to, over time, gravitate towards something you really like, and you'll just do that. That's what you'll do all the time. Personally, I like to take candid pictures of my family and my friends, events like weddings that I go to and take pictures. But everything I take pictures of is candid. No poses. No, I don't like poses. Some photographers do like poses, are very good at it. I'm not. But you might be good at it. You might like it. And what I mean by candid is just natural. Natural setting, natural life, natural emotions. And that could be happy, sad, whatever. Real life type of photography is what I like, what I kind of gravitate towards. My mom was into nature. My mom loved nature photography with her 35 millimeter. She always took pictures of nature. She loved it. Every picture pretty much she took growing up was nature. Myself gravitated towards kind of candid photography. You yourself might like sports. You might like action. You might like, tumultuous nature. A storm chaser that takes pictures of tumultuous clouds and tornadoes, and you might get into that. It might be really what you like. Some of you might get into artistic type of photography, where a lot of post-production is done. Some might get into architecturally type of photography for houses, structures. Also, you have photography for modeling, for clothes, things of that nature. All different types of photography you can get into. Macro photography is another type. But the reason I say that is ISO, aperture, and shutter speed works with all of those areas I just mentioned in a different way. And you adjust them in a different way. And this semester, you'll learn how all of those work to help you take a better photo. Now ISO, we talked about noise in the last slide. Noise is similar to film grain and causes a loss of fine detail in your images. So if you bump up the ISO in this room too high, it kind of not only gives you a granular effect, but it kind of whitewashes the image out, kind of like puts a vampire-ish effect on things, like a white film over everything. And once you have that, you can't really do much with that in post-production. It's pretty much meaningless to try when you have such a granular and such a high ISO. It's more visible in dark parts of an image and generally more noticeable when displayed on the screen than on print. So a high ISO image looks terrible on a monitor, but actually looks better in print. That's about the only one I can think of that looks better in print is a higher ISO. Then you don't have to do much correcting to it. And it's because of the colors in print are different than the colors on your monitor. Your colors in print, you have cyan, magenta, black mainly for most printers, that's it. Cyan, magenta, yellow, black, that's it, 4 colors. Your monitor literally has millions of colors, million variations of colors. And so printing you can get away with. Digital, I mean, some of your computers today have very high quality monitors to where they see things that photographers didn't see 5 years ago on a monitor. They see those now. They see the imperfections. They see it made them better photography now, but it also takes longer to think of ways to get better lighting and better poses and better structure of that film or that setting before you take the picture. Some cameras claim to have digital image stabilization. This just means that the camera will automatically increase the ISO in order to adjust for faster shutter speed or allow for faster shutter speed. So what it does basically on image stabilization, when it sees something move, all it does basically is takes that picture faster. The shutter speed literally increases faster for you to offset movement. Does that make sense? So you're literally taking, it's not doing anything post-picture, it's doing while you're taking a picture. So when it sees something move in your LCD or your viewfinder that you're taking a picture of, if you move slightly, it just speeds up that shutter speed for you automatically when you're taking that picture. ISO will also be increased as well. Fast shutter speed will reduce the likelihood of a camera shake, but high ISO will also result in a granular image, more grainy image effect. The fourth element, which is white balance. White balance basically doesn't really affect your exposure, just the appearance of colors, because just like this whiteboard, without knowing true white, you can't have true yellow, true reds, true blue, true whatever color you can think of. White is the foundation color you have to have. Your camera has to know what white is. And so the fourth element is white balance. And basically, it helps the appearance of colors to be more truer with true white. So different light sources cast different colors, which you cannot see with the naked eye. White balance is essentially the camera compensating for the color cast of light in the room. So like fluorescent light gives off a different color than say your LED light in your car or your lamp light at home or your refrigerator light or your closet light. So all these different lights give off different colors that you and I don't see, and that's where white balance comes in. So the color cast refers to a color temperature is rated in what's called Kelvin degrees or from cool to warm. Most digital cameras have automatic white balance, but they also have options for manual white balance or different automatic white balances for different light sources. So you have light balance for, say, fluorescent, light balance for sunny, light balance for cloudy, light balance for everything. Beach, snow, party, indoor party, outdoor party, pool party, every type of white balance. So basic in-camera settings. Exposure modes. There are several modes available which offer a combination of automatic and manual control over 3 elements of exposure. Auto, which sometimes is represented on your camera dial by the A. So if you have your camera with you, you can actually be looking at it while I'm kind of talking about it. We will be going over dial information here for too long, what you have on your actual menu. A simple green square is usually fully automatic. True point and shoot, where the camera decides what setting you're going to use. And that's what you're going to use tonight when you guys do your group lab tonight. It's automatic. AV, or aperture priority, allows you to choose the aperture value, and the camera chooses the shutter speed. TV, or shutter priority, allows you to choose a shutter speed while the camera chooses the aperture for you to give correct exposure. M, or manual, some of your cameras will have this. If yours doesn't, don't worry about it. This will give you complete manual control. You can usually in this area manipulate both the shutter and the aperture combined in the manual mode. Scene modes. A lot of your cameras will have different scene modes, right? I already mentioned some of them, like party mode, portrait mode. They're basically fully automatic modes designed for certain situations. Fireworks mode is an example. They typically place emphasis on one or more settings based on typical circumstance or situation. Most cameras have several scene modes. Even your DSLRs now have scene modes built in to the DSLRs. Backlight is a scene mode, eliminates dark shadows when there's light coming from behind the subject or when the subject's in the shade. Built-in flash automatically fills in around the subject and all the shadows. Beach and snow, photograph beach, snow and sunlight or sunlit water scenes. Exposure and white balance are set to help prevent the scene from becoming whitewashed and looking washed out. Tripods recommended in the beach snow setting. Fireworks mode, tripod needs to be used in this one as well because you have shutter speeds and exposure are set for shooting fireworks. Pre-focusing and using tripod is recommended. Landscape, taking wide scenes, which we'll do this semester. Camera automatically focuses on a distant object. Macro, close-up, small objects like a flower or insect. Lens can be moved closer to the subject than in other modes. Hold the camera very steady in this one, or you can use a tripod. Night portrait, taking photos at night against a night scene outside, generally. Built-in flash for red eye reduction are enabled. Shutter speeds are low, thus tripod is needed. Night scene, portrait night scenes are pre-programmed to use a slow shutter speed, tripod. So anytime you see slow or you yourself need to use a slow shutter speed, tripod's always recommended to use. Party mode, photos in a dim light room. Exposure and shutter are automatically adjusted for brightness. Captures indoor background lighting and candlelight. Hold the camera very steady, or you can also use tripod in this one. Portrait mode, main subjects in clear focus while everything else is out of focus. Best when taking shots outside during the daytime, shooting mid to long photo lens, standing close to your subject within recommended camera range. Usually in this portrait mode, they recommend anywhere from 5 to 10 feet is the range that they recommend for portrait. Select an uncomplicated background that's not going to distract from the subject. Sports mode, or kids and pet mode. Taking photos of fast-moving objects, freeze frame objects. The best shots when taken in bright light, like indoors in an arena, outside during a midday event. Pre-focus is recommended. And I also recommend on this one, tripod, just so you can get the right shot. Not really so much to keep steady, but just so you can get the right shot and not have to worry. Sunset, taking photos of sunsets and sunrises helps keep the deep hues in the scene. And metering modes. Metering modes on your camera are a system within your camera that's measured the amount of light in a frame and then determines the best exposure for meter mode. And there's different types of meter mode. You have center meter mode, multimeter mode, dot meter mode. Basically, like on the center meter mode, which most of your cameras are set up by default, it looks at the center of the viewfinder where you're taking a picture and focuses in on that by default. Okay? And that's meter mode. There is different types of meter mode. I already mentioned one, center, the most common in digital systems. Center weighted as metering system of choice in digicams and do not offer other metering modes. Exposure metering is averaged over the entire frame. Usually in this one, sometimes your camera will actually take 3 types or 3 shots of a photo in exposure metering mode, and each photo is a different meter exposure. And we'll talk about what that is this semester. In fact, it's called the EV mode, where you can have like a -1, 0, +1 for exposure mode. It'll take all 3 automatically, and then you choose which one you like the best. Matrix is basically a complex system that looks at your entire view that you're looking at, and then you determine which one. Some of your cameras actually let you choose which one of these meters you want to select, whether by touching the screen or using the dial to select the meter you want. Spot metering covers just about 4%, under 4% of the viewfinder. It takes a precise exposure reading only at the very center of the frame and disregards the rest of it. A spot meter is used when a subject is backlit in a bright room. For example, when there's extreme brightness in a scene. So graduation is a good example where it's pretty well lit. You want to focus on the subject. A wedding is a good example, generally fairly well lit as a bride and groom is walking down the aisle. You can use spot metering to get spot on to the face of the bride and groom as they're walking. It will not focus in on anything else in that scene. It's going to focus in on the face of the bride and groom for metering. Spot metering works well. Partial metering takes up 13.5%. This is best used for portrait photos where you have more than one subject and it's underexposed in the area that you're taking a photo of, and it gives a better exposure using the partial metering. And some of your cameras will not have all of these metering modes, so don't worry about it if you don't. I'm going to end on this term here called rule of thirds. Anybody heard of that before? Rule of thirds when it comes to photography or images or whatever. Basically, it's an old term, and it actually dates back in science. Splitting the universe can basically, or the universe itself, can be looked at as a rule of thirds. Your ear, a snail, the ocean and land division, a number of the sky and the land, even going to the galaxies, have a third rule of thirds. So basically, imagine the frame of your camera divided into 3 equal sections, both horizontally and vertically. Some of your cameras already have this grid turned on by default, unless you turn it off. It's divided into thirds. The concept is placing your subject or elements along one of these lines, and especially on a intersecting point, like the upper right intersecting quadrant, upper left, bottom right, to make it more attractive to the viewer. So when you take photos from here on out, starting tonight even, when you take photos of each other, you're basically going to focus on one of those 4 quadrants in your camera. So the face of a person will be in one of those 4. Generally, for facial photography, for portrait photography, it's going to be in the upper right or left quadrant of the photo. So not smack dab in the middle anymore. You want to kind of off-center it from the left or right. What that does is it gives your canvas of your photo, what I learned in graphic design when I took that over the years and when I was taking that in school, it's called white space. It gives your layout white space, which when we first started doing anything as little kids even, when mom and dad gives us a color, crayons, right, and a piece of paper, what do we want to do? Start drawing within the lines real nice and neat? I'm going to take and cover that whole sheet with paper, with round, right? From corner to corner, it's covered with colors, right? That's human nature. We don't want any white space. We want it all filled up. Well, that's human nature as well, to want to fill up your whole canvas that you're taking a photo of with something. And it's a struggle, even for myself when I first started taking photos, to not want to fill everything up in that LCD viewer, or in that viewfinder, or when I first started, the Brownie camera. But the more space you give a subject, the more your mind fills in stuff around that subject that maybe not even be there. An example would be a person running down a beach. You're taking a picture of them, right? And they're running this way. You guys are looking at me there. You're taking a picture this way. They're running off the scene, and you take a picture of them right here. It's like a landscape. Behind here is the ocean, and they're running this way. And say they're right here, running this way. The first thought people have is, what's to the right of that person? What are they running towards? What's going to, I mean, our mind wanders and we fill stuff in, like, do they live down that way? Are they meeting somebody? They look happy. You know, our mind fills in stuff when the camera doesn't. And that's what you want. Yeah.
I wonder what's behind it.
Could be that as well, yes. Wondering what's making behind him, making him run. So, and in that shot I just talked about, the subject actually takes up a very little part of that image. But that's the main subject. 3/4 of the image is the ocean and the beach, and just a little sliver over here is the main subject. That's what you want to get. That's the kind of thing you want to go for when you're taking photos. Is scenic, but at the same time, everything around that subject is complementing them, but you want the eyes to fill in naturally, and people can fill in whatever they want to. That's the beauty of photography. You see something, I see something, we all see something different, right? And so here's some illustrations real quick of rule of thirds illustrated. Looking at imaginary rule of third on this, in what quadrant would this subject be? Well, let's first of all talk about what is the subject of this image. What do you think it is? No wrong answer. Sunset. Anybody else? Anybody says tree? Okay. So you can say both. Again, it depends on you. The photographer, in this case, I'm guessing, is shooting for what you don't see initially, which is that little island with the tree sticking out of it, right? You don't even see it. What do we see first? The sunset, right? It's brighter. We're going to see it. But then you're naturally, that's the first point. But then secondly, you start floating your eyes over like, whoa, what is that? Oh, that's a little island with a tree on it. And you really start imagining, does somebody live on that? You know, how long has it been there? You know, all these different things go through your head, right? And so your subject does not always have to be the very first thing that the subject looks at. In fact, a lot of times you don't want it to be the first thing. You want them to think about it for a second. You want them to float upon that. You don't want them to float too long on your picture, but you want them to be able to naturally flow. Like in this way, it's in it's in juxtaposition to the sunset, right? It's fairly close to the sunset. It's literally right there. So it's not like you have to browse too much. And we see it. So first of all, the sunset, the nice tones on the clouds, and then we see that beautiful island that we're picturing is maybe in the daytime, and we may be picturing green leaves, and we're picturing somebody, maybe that's the subject, person fishing or something. You know, we don't know what it is. Okay, we just start filling it in, and so that's good. So rule of thirds in this case, we'll say it's the tree is the subject, is the bottom right corner quadrant of the image. It also filled in the subject here towards this part, the upper left of the sunset, but mainly on this one, the bottom right. Let's look at this one. Let's look at the top left one first. What's the subject in this picture that you see? What do you first focus on first? What does your eye float on first? What's it see? Boom, whatever it is, right? You don't know what it is at first, but it's something, right? It just boom right there to the it almost looked like a snail on a cat's tail. I mean, your eyes focus on it. Boom, right there. Nothing to guess on that. Everything else is pretty much blurred in the background. And what quadrant is this found at? Top left, yeah. Let's look at the wrong to the right. What's the subject there? Or let me go back. I'm jumping ahead too much. Where does your eye first jump on that picture on the right? On the house immediately. Immediately, right? Even though you do see the water, you do see the sky, you go right to the house. It's right there. It's pretty prominent, right, in that. And it's not taking up a big part of the picture. And complements, everything else complements it. But upper right quadrant on that one. So rule of thirds is very simple. You place the subject along the lines or near the intersecting points. For portraits, the eyes are often positioned on one of the horizontal lines, preferably the one near the PowerPoint, near the photograph, more pleasingly to look at and naturally draw your attention to the eye. For landscape, the horizon is aligned on the either upper or lower quadrant of the picture. So it's lower 2/3 or upper 2/3.
Which you saw in that picture of the island.
Exactly, yeah.
The land is right on that.
Yep, the land is right on that. So you've got, in this case here, the water's basically 2/3, sky 1/3, roughly. Doesn't have to be exact, but. So your sunset and landscape would definitely fall upon that horizon, whether it be the line here or line here, one of the two, the upper third or lower third. Post-production stuff, I think I mentioned this last week. If you haven't already downloaded, please do so, Picasa at home, and install it. Just install it for right now. Don't worry about doing anything yet. Just install it to get it ready to use. And now I'm going to take some pictures. So now we're going to do some stuff here real quick. Let's go next in the class here. Almost done. Okay, start looking at each other because you're going to have to pick some people here in a second here. All right, at least, let's do this. I think last semester I did 4 and it was some pushing some people. So I'm going to say minimum of 2 people. You have to have at least 2. That's about as minimum as you can go, right, for a group? Can't go any lower than that. Let me say me, myself, and I can do 3. So minimum of 2 people, no more than 4. I want you to pick a couple people there, 2 to 4 people. That'd be great. And here's what you're going to do. When you leave tonight, you're not going to do it in here. I'm going to have you set your camera to auto on your camera. And you can definitely help each other on this. I want you to take a photo of your neighbors, plural. And to take a photo in auto, it's pretty simple on all your cameras. It works from point and shoot to DSLR. You're going to press the shutter halfway down and hold it. And what it's going to do during that time in autofocus, it's going to autofocus that subject. And to a lot of your cameras will actually give a green light of go. Some of your cameras will not let you take the photo until you get that green light of go. So however your camera functions, all of your cameras should let you push the button halfway down to focus in nicely. Press it all the way down to take the photo. Let the subject you just took a photo of, your new friend, pick the photo that you took. And I suggest taking 2 to 3 photos. Say if you pick a group of 4, you're taking 3, 3, and 3. Let each person choose a photo. Delete the photos they don't like right then and there. Delete them because you won't remember when you get home, if you're like me. And then when you get home, you're going to upload those photos into week 2. Week 2. I'm gonna have, it says here to upload them here, but Eagle's given issues with photos. Was everybody able to successfully create your Foki account? I believe you were. Foki's really easy to create albums. I don't think I should have to help you on that. If you do need help, see me after class and I'll help you. Basically what I want you to do in Foki is create an album for week 2, called week 2, upload, if you have 3 pictures you took tonight, you're a group of 4, you're taking 3 pictures, upload those 3 pictures, and I want you to label the pictures with their initials, not their first and last name. These are going to be public. I don't want people's names out there for everybody to see. So I want just your initials, the people's initials you're taking a photo of. So first name, last name, initial, that's it. That makes sense? So what that means is you're probably going to have to take your phone and write down their initial, or a lot of students, what they'll do with this assignment is they'll take a picture with their camera, also take a picture with the phone, and tag that picture and send it to themselves, whether email or whatever you want to do it. That way you have a picture with the names. That makes sense? If you to get to know each other, it probably I suggested when you take the picture of that person with your phone to have them type their name in, because if their name's like mine, sometimes they misspell it. I know I would misspell my own name at times. And so you might give that person the phone so they can type in their full name. And then spend a few moments getting to know each other a little bit. It should take a few minutes to finish this before you leave tonight. You can do this out in the foyer area. If you keep walking, though, through the double doors, these double doors, and then keep walking further to another set of double doors, there's a really nice chair and table area in there. You guys can take photos there. But get them all done before you leave. Find a nice backdrop in those rooms to take your picture, and everybody can kind of find a location. And then once you're finished, it does say in here, I know, to upload your photos, but I want you to post it in week 2 in Foki, and I will change the, I'll change that file upload to submission. I have everybody's link for Foki already. So all you're going to have to do once you're finished with your assignment here, when you upload them to Foki, I'm going to change this from file upload to text, and you're just going to type in there done. And I'll go to your Foki account and look at your pictures. Make sense? So you don't need to post a URL there. You've already given me that, and I can find your pictures that way. So questions on your in-class? Take home. Already did it. It's the same thing. In fact, I think on this one, oh yeah, I want to get rid of the other one. The in-class and take home are the same.
You said week 1 in this one though,
Does it say week 1?
so. Yeah.
I want to change that. I want it to be week 2 because it is week 2. So I'll change the directions there to be week 2. But forget the in-class one. We're going to do it all right here. And where it says post your URL, I shouldn't need that because you guys have already given me a URL for Foki, right? So I shouldn't need that. So just, I'll have you post. I'll change that to say done or something to where you'll just be, when you're finished uploading, you're finished. Questions? Okay, go forth and photo each other. Be nice to each other. Get to know each other. Make sure before you leave each other, you have that person or those people in your group delete all the photos but the one that they like. All right? Enjoy.